It is time for Doctor and the Dude. I'm Dr. Jim Siebert, and joining me is the Dude, Josh Morganman. How you doing today, Josh?
Doing great, getting ready. We're almost into hurricane season, so getting revved up.
Yeah, you know what? We all have to. So we thought today we'd do a little bit of schooling on some lessons that we have learned in some of the things that we've dealt with in the past. So let's start with you today. So let's talk about a lesson, an important lesson that you've learned from covering a hurricane.
Oh yeah, I would say the big one that I have after being in a lot of really bad hurricanes is windows are the Achilles heel of a house or a building, and you got to cover those windows. And if you don't, you'll pay a price. And it's just I've seen it so many times that the windows break, the wind gets in, and then all kinds of havoc happens. The ceiling gets ripped down, walls inside collapse, even the roof comes off. And it's just, think about it, it's a pretty simple thing. Just get that glass covered either with boards or shutters or something like that. And you could just, that little bit of prevention can actually save the structure from a very kind of sad fate.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as you said, that it's wood or some type of shutter, but not tape. I think hopefully by now most people have learned that tape is not your friend when you're covering your windows for a hurricane.
Yeah, it basically does nothing. I mean, some folks have argued that it's not going to keep the glass from breaking, but maybe it'll keep it from like flying if it breaks. But I think it's basically a waste of energy. The thing is, you got to cover the windows with like a real covering. And there's all kinds, by the way. There are boards, there are functional shutters, and there's some like new technologies now. They have these kind of canvas coverings that almost act like a trampoline to like deflect flying debris. There's different ways to do it. And I know folks think of it as a pain in the neck, but just doing that one little thing, like I said, the windows are the Achilles heel. It's the weakest part of the house. You got to cover them.
Yeah, and also one thing I'll say about tape, I think it can make it worse because it can make larger pieces of glass that can fly, and that actually becomes more dangerous. So you have a big piece of glass flying at you versus some shattered glass. But yeah, those are some great ideas. Now, as far as my lesson that I've learned, this might be a little bit surprising to you. This is one that I actually didn't go through myself, but of course I forecasted, and that was Hurricane Sandy, or other known as Superstorm Sandy, because it went to New York. For the rest of the world, for us, it was Sandy. But for me, the lesson that I learned from that was people who have not been in tropical weather before need to not go down to the tropical weather when it's blowing in. For example, a lot of the people that actually lost their lives thought it would be fun to go down to the storm and watch it roll in. Now, why is that a lesson learned? Because when I first was being introduced to hurricanes and tropical weather, your first instinct, well, kind of like you, Josh, is you go into the storm, but you're trained and you know what you're doing, as opposed to someone who doesn't know what they're doing can really put their life at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have that temptation. We want to see the action. And I know, like I said, a terrible example for people, but yeah, I mean, the point is there's so many dangers when you're out on the road. There's the wind, there's falling trees, there's flooding. I mean, there's so many ways to get hurt outside, even in a tropical storm or something that's no longer tropical.
Yeah, and so I really do think, though, that people learn from those storms. And so a lot of the people, like up in the Northeast, who had to deal with Sandy, were better equipped when more tropical weather started heading in that direction. Now,
Absolutely.
I understand you have a question for me today.
Yeah, I do. And I'm kind of embarrassed to ask because I know you're like, we're not supposed to look at long range computer models, especially before hurricane season has even started. However, the GFS has been showing some action in the Gulf. And I can't help. I have to ask you about it. What do you think of that? Is it just some crazy model static or is there something there?
Okay, so long-range modeling, as you know, as you were just saying, okay, you have to take it with a grain of salt. So what I look for example, we're talking about like 2 weeks from now, right, that something might form into the Gulf of Mexico. So, and of course, having come from Houston, Texas, where I forecasted for years, that's a big deal. And it goes out on Twitter, goes out on social media, and everybody begins to react, overreact to it or underreact too. What I think is that you have to look at long-range models with a grain of salt, and what you're looking for is trend. So if it pops up and I see something, 2 weeks from today, okay, I'll say, look, all right, the GFS is saying that. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but this thing I know it's going to happen is that this model will change. But what we're going to look at between now and tomorrow is how does it change? Does it disappear? Does it kind of look steady in that? And so really what I'm looking at is the trend more than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I look for that too. Continuity. Does the feature appear run after run? Does it stick, or does it just kind of come and go? That's an interesting thing. Listen, I know late May climatologically, that is super early for any hurricane to be threatening the Gulf Coast. So
Well,
I know to be skeptical.
but typically the Gulf Coast will get something, usually the last week of May or the first week of June, something pops up, an area of low pressure, maybe it's subtropical, maybe it's tropical, but it's definitely something that can happen. I mean, we do, it's more likely to have a tropical storm than it would be a hurricane. And so like right now on that long range model, it says hurricane, which I would kind of doubt at this point. But we're going to look at that trend. And I promise you, is that whatever it says right now, it will be different. It is not going to be from there exactly what's going to happen. So everybody just sort of watch it. But it's a great reminder that hurricane season is almost here, and it's time to kind of watch these things, but never overreact. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we will continue to monitor that. We're just like at the beginning of hurricane season, and I'm sure somebody's going to get rain from that thing, whatever it is, but at this point it's too early to call. But Josh, that's always a good question. All right, we are out of time for this segment, but I learned something from Josh about the windows, and I hope you learned something about the forecast. We'll see you next time.